Elizabeth Crane, a BHS biology teacher, is a true teacher. Liz's enthusiasm for her subject, love and respect for her students, and desire to help other students and teachers is evident in everything she does. As a teacher at the high school, Liz makes it a point to make real connections, not only with her own students, but also with other students in the school who she may not teach, but might run into. For 21 years, Liz Crane has been putting students first in every way. By revamping the biology curriculum, making it more hands-on and interactive, encouraging all students to succeed, and making sure their non-academic selves are in good shape as well. As a mentor to new teachers, Ms. Crane is also fully present and available to give feedback, advice, and collaboration. She's a treasure to the high school and the science department, and the BEF is thrilled to give her the Caverly Award. It's my pleasure to introduce Anthony Meyer, head of school at Brookline High School, who will say a few words about Elizabeth Crane.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, BEF. Thank you, colleagues of Brookline High School and across the district. Thank you, families and friends of Liz and Sarah in particular who are here today. I want to take a moment and say congratulations to Sarah O'Shea. Thank you so much for that gift of a speech to us. I really appreciate it. Congratulations. It's my job, though, to introduce Liz Crane to you, and I can't do that without saying her name a few times, and I'll hopefully explain why. So, Elizabeth Crane, Elizabeth Crane, Elizabeth Crane. I have been a dean at Brookline High School for a long time. I am no longer, but still sometimes long to be. And when kids are struggling, or when we're preparing for a year, we look at our kids' schedules who we're worried about and see who the teachers are that are going to wrap around a kid who we're concerned for. And I can just tell you that when I saw Elizabeth Crane on a schedule, it was a guarantee to me that a kid would be cared for and well taught. So Elizabeth Crane, Elizabeth Crane, Elizabeth Crane. I will not try to imitate high schoolers as much as I want to, but I need to tell you in the words that I have that when kids who are Liz Crane students talk about her, it is with an awe and a love that is palpable. Again, I can better describe it than I can say it, but the tone lifts as they say, Ms. Crane, Ms. Crane, Ms. Crane, and to watch the kids, her students, as we presented, as Linus referenced, a bunch of us poured in, and it was not during a class time. So I believe during X block, which is the time when kids want to do just their own thing, there they all were to celebrate Liz Crane, and it was a wonderful moment. I also want to acknowledge there are many people in the room who could present Liz because they worked closely with her. I think of Ed Weiser, our science chair. I think of Bob Weintraub, our former head of school who helped hire Liz. I think of Steph McAllister, who helps run Teachers Mentoring Teachers. I look at Liz's biology teachers. There are so many people that love Liz Crane, and I am one of them. Liz, I'm not going to read the testimonials about you that were submitted to the BEF as much as I'd love to. I want you to read directly what your colleagues, students, families said about you and have a private moment where you can just take that all in. I suggest Kleenex, but they're wonderful testimonials to the work that you do. Liz Crane is a wonderful person. I want to make a joke how there's no one as wonderful as her in this room, but I realize that might offend some of you, so I won't make that joke. That's humor, even if it's imperceptible. She's also an excellent teacher, and Catherine spoke to some of that. I think one phrase that has become in vogue is the notion of the warm demander. And I would just say, as I said the day that we shared with Liz that she had won the Caverly, she is the personification of the warm demander. She is such an incredibly nice human being. And almost more importantly, she has incredibly high expectations for every kid. And that matters because I know they feel the love from Ms. Crane, and they also feel like they can do more than they ever imagined they could. And that combination, that deep care, that push and pull that is you propelling them towards their future, learning, growing, is also palpable. And kids know that. I think we all know this in this room, certainly the educators, that kids are watching us and sensing what our tone is, what our attitude is towards them in any given moment. And Liz Crane does an incredible job of moving kids forward. Liz is also a leader, an absolute leader, and there are many teachers, I almost said students, but teachers in this room who have experienced the combination of Liz and Steph in teachers mentoring teachers. And I can't talk about that experience without acknowledging that when I came here 19 years ago and had Gail Davis and Margaret Metzger, who was referenced earlier, as the leaders of that program, it made me realize this is an incredibly special high school. This is an incredibly special district. And when our newest teachers are led into the enterprise, acculturated, supported, and pushed with kindness by the likes of Steph McAllister and Liz Crane, the world is a wonderful, wonderful place. Lastly, I would just say I always try to stick to the belief, maybe from the WHO, that the kids are all right. And it has been hard at times post-pandemic to say that with as much confidence. And I just want to acknowledge that Liz has had some difficult situations to navigate this year as a teacher. And I am respectful. I respect deeply how you, Liz, handled those incredibly challenging situations, continued to push with high expectations, and to stay strong, stay graceful, and stay a model for who we ought to be as human beings, especially in a learning and teaching context. So more importantly, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the winner of Brookline High School's, well, it's not really Brookline High School's, it's the BEF's Ernest R. Caverly, but our version, the counterpart to Sarah O'Shea, Elizabeth, Ms. Crane, Liz Crane, come on up. Congratulations.
All right, can you hear me? All right, thank you so much, Anthony. That was a lot of really wonderful, warm words, and I really appreciate it. And Sarah, it's such a fun award to share with you. What an honor. Let's thank Dr. Guillory for leading us, and of course, Anthony for his work as our BHS principal, Bob Weintraub, former BHS principal, also here today, BEF members and leadership for their support, as well as the funding of so many rejuvenating and inspiring grants over the years, especially ones that afforded me the chance to attend different professional conferences. I want to thank parents and students, past and present, all of my BHS colleagues, especially Ed Weiser, the entire science department, biology colleagues and friends, Sarah Hemphill, Heather Giblin, Brianna Brown, Dory Lamb, Wen Saylor, Brad Kozel, Ben Little, Jasmine Juo, Abby Janes, and Catherine Wolf, who make my job infinitely more fun and so much more collaborative. To Stephanie McAllister, my partner in teacher mentoring work at BHS, and Brian Poon, who long ago introduced me to BHS. the entire Pierce community, including current principal Jamie Yadoff and past principal Leslie Ryan Miller. My 5th and 8th grade children attend Pierce through the materials fee program, and that hugely magnifies my loyalty and human connection that I feel with PSB. And of course, the most important thank yous, my family, my parents are here, my aunt and uncle are here, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law are all here today. My husband, Nat, who has spent, I think, almost his entire life in the same household as a Brookline High teacher. Not sure anybody else has quite that same honor. His dad, Steve Tipton, was a long-time and much-loved BHS English teacher. Nat is endlessly supportive of the never-ending work of the various teachers in his life. And of course, my own awesome, amazing kids, Molly, the 8th grader, and Hannah, the 5th grader. Before beginning, I should also clarify that I anonymously discussed 2 specific students. Each of these students has pre-approved the relevant sections of this speech. So I thank each of these students for what they've taught me and their willingness to be featured today. All right, here goes. I was not always a fan of Brookline High School, nor did I intend to pursue biology or stay in teaching for very long. I grew up in Lexington, attending Lexington High School and playing on the tennis team. We thought we had a pretty good team until we decisively lost to Brookline High in the state tournament over 2 consecutive years. I was not a Brookline High fan. In middle and high school, I loved the logic of math and languages. I still think today of my incredible Latin teacher, Dr. Fiveash, and how he related so deeply to his students and instilled in us a love of learning. Science, on the other hand, was not my thing. In 10th grade, I enrolled in AP Biology and lasted for about 3 weeks. It seemed like a whole lot of gibberish to me with altogether way too much memorization. Come college, math had become far too abstract, and French was suddenly an analysis of literature. I became interested in a career in medicine, and so I gave the sciences another try. This time, I loved them. I majored in biology and decided to take a break for a few years before graduation, and I thought I would teach during that break before the intensity of medical training. Well, I think we all know how this story ends. Spoiler alert, I didn't go to medical school, and teaching was not a break. I fell in love with teaching at the Fieldston School, a private school in New York City. After 3 years, I left, seeking a job in a public school, but wondering if I'd ever love a school community as much as I loved Fieldston. I went to graduate school and then landed a job in Brookline. My first year was rough, but the Teachers Mentoring Teachers, TMT program, was a lifeline. I doubted my ability to successfully run a classroom at BHS, let alone find joy in the work. But each subsequent year got better, and I'm so glad I stayed. So what has kept me in teaching, and at Brookline High in particular? Undoubtedly, it's the people, colleagues, the community in general, and of course, the students. And there is another element as well. While in TMT program as a first-year teacher, I remember longtime and brilliant English teacher Margaret Metzger, who we've heard a little bit about already, telling me, my closest friends know not to ask me, how's your teaching year going? But instead, Margaret, what are you working on this year? She continued, these questions, what am I working on during any given year? That's what keeps me in teaching. So what questions am I working on? What questions have kept me in teaching for the past 24 years? Well, during my first years, I was just working on survival questions, like, how can I minimize the chance of being mistaken for a student again? How do I not turn beet red and start to sweat profusely when students ask me questions I do not have the expertise to answer? Over the next years, my questions became much more about structure, and then veered toward curriculum. And now I also think about systemic and philosophical questions with no easy-to-solve answers. How can schools and systems best take care of each of their educators in the same way that educators strive to take the best possible care of each student? Or what leadership opportunities can systems and schools extend to mid-career educators, keeping them firmly grounded in their practice and classrooms and also honoring their expertise and wisdom? And for a more philosophical question, in what ways is disequilibrium necessary for growth and learning? It's this final question, in what way is disequilibrium necessary for growth and learning, that I want to explore a little bit more today. I love using biology content as an analogy for life wisdom. For example, when studying the teeny tiny ants that protect the rainforest's massive trees, I remind my students that little things in life matter more than you think. Or when studying the myriad of enzymes that must work together to catalyze a single process like DNA replication, I ask my students to consider the value of teamwork and the whole being more than the sum of its parts. And back to the idea of disequilibrium, we have a unit on neurons and the ways in which brain cells transmit messages. We take an in-depth look at the imbalance of sodium ions across the cell membrane. The students come to understand that neurons would be unresponsive and inert without this imbalance. And we start to talk a little bit about their own lives. And yes, how balance is important. And so too is pushing yourself out of your comfort zone as long as the right supports are in place. I ask my students to think about times in which they learned more or differently because they weren't let off the hook or because they extended into a zone of disequilibrium. So how has this idea of disequilibrium played out in strong and powerful ways over my career here at BHS? Some examples relate to my own professional development. Participating in SEED was one such powerful experience. The support was undeniable and critical. Facilitators and colleagues Cara Lopez and Jeanette Sargent nourished our bellies with spectacular breakfasts at the beginning of each of our Saturday morning sessions. While eating warm coffee cake and crispy bacon, our SEED group learned about, reflected upon, and discussed race, ethnicity, ability, sexuality, gender, and socioeconomics on personal, educational, and systemic levels, realizing that you truly don't know what you don't know. There was discomfort, support, honesty, growth, and joy. Without that combination of disequilibrium and support, I know that the learning would have been nowhere near as powerful. Other times, the disequilibrium plays out in my classroom. Several years ago in the late fall, I vividly remember talking with a student, quiet, hardworking, inquisitive, collaborative. With a slight wobble in her voice, she told me, "AP biology is too hard. I'm going to drop it. I love learning biology, but I can't do this class. I can't get this grade." Having seen her attitude and work ethic over the previous months, I told her that she 100% belonged in the course and that I was reluctant to consider a switch. She seemed surprised, nervous, and initially kind of upset with my pushback. We continued with a conversation about how meaningful it feels to truly earn a grade through hard work over time, rather than sail through with an A. Together, we agreed that she would stay in the course. She re-entered with renewed confidence, doing incredibly impressive work, gaining resilience, and finding a deeper understanding of herself. As a teacher, it is tough to know how far to push students in their disequilibrium. Certainly there are times when changing courses would be the right decision. But when do we have an obligation to push, as long as important relationships and strong support exist? At a place such as Brookline High, we know that pressure plays a huge and often detrimental role. But sometimes a well-timed push from a trusted mentor, colleague, teacher, or peer becomes a critical vote of confidence, a statement of profound belief in a person's abilities. Still other times, the disequilibrium plays out in the hallway. I was in a hurry going back to my classroom, likely with a stack of recently photocopied handouts, knowing that my biology students would soon be arriving. I walked past a group of students I did not recognize. They seemed to be having a good time together, and then I heard one of them use language I found deeply offensive. I knew I had to stop. I tried to figure out what to do with the handouts on the verge of spilling all over the place, and then I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Ms. Crane. I teach biology right over there. Wondering if you know why I've stopped. Silence. No eye contact. A few long seconds passed. I heard you say something I couldn't ignore. More silence. Do you know what I'm referring to? No. And then more silence, followed by anger, the student running away, and me flailing as I tried one last time to encourage the student to come back, offer their name, and engage with me. I was frustrated, upset, and really uncomfortable. I caught a few physical details and started composing an email in my mind. With T-minus 2 minutes before class was due to begin, I quickly wrote a semi-descriptive email to multiple deans. By the time my class had ended and I checked email again, I had replies from all of them, including one in particular who was on it. A few hours later, the dean had a name as well as the name of the student's social worker. I wrote to the social worker and we arranged for a meeting between the social worker, the student, and myself. I dreaded the meeting, and the student probably did too. Couldn't I just skip it? Was it really as important as it had seemed in that moment? The three of us sat down, the social worker doing a masterful job setting up the tone of the meeting. I reintroduced myself. The students' body language was closed, and they were not interested in participating. By the end of the meeting, the student had spoken, albeit briefly and unwillingly. But we had begun the process of working through rather than working around. At the end of the following summer, I got rosters for my classes. The student was on my roster. How would this go? How would the student react? How would I react? I greeted students at the door. Most of the students were new to me, but of course not this particular student. Should I play dumb? Pretend we'd never met? No, that didn't feel quite right. Should I say, oh, you're the one from the hallway last year, and then the meeting with the social worker? Definitely not. So I just smiled and said I was happy to see her. The student gave me a quick smile back. She entered the room, sat down with her friends. The class began shortly afterward. Fast forward a few months, the student and I found space to talk a little bit. How did you feel being assigned to my class? Nervous, the student replied. I wasn't sure how it would go. I confessed that I felt the same way, but that I was so glad the student had landed in my class. She agreed. In working through this encounter, there was a lot of disequilibrium and a lot of support. And the support was not only of the student, but also of me. The social worker used a combination of skill and magic, to quote Elon Fisher's speech many years ago, to help turn a wounding hallway encounter into a rocky and then wonderful beginning of a much longer relationship with this student. Do students, teachers, deans, and social workers wish for these encounters? Absolutely not. But when they do happen, there are opportunities for growth on all sides. Maybe there's another biology lesson in here. When bone fractures occur, our skeleton heals back stronger if given the proper medical attention. Likewise, when social wounds occur, relationships can heal back stronger if given the right support. And there's another lesson here. We desperately need our amazing social workers at Brookline High. But sometimes, maybe even most of the time, balance and relaxation and exhalation are just what we need. After all, cells also spend a lot of time in equilibrium. Our favorite comfort foods, quiet time in nature, personal and classroom routines, sun-drenched beaches, and laughter with friends, family, colleagues, and students fill our tanks and afford us the energy to grow during times of supported disequilibrium. So, here's to those who came before us and to the questions that keep us in the business of teaching. Here's to finding balance, embracing complexity, knowing when to push and when to hold back. Here's to being supports for one another as we, just like brain cells, venture into disequilibrium while also joyfully experiencing the extended times of equilibrium. Here's to us, an amazing, incredibly skilled, and dynamic group of Brookline educators.